Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to Fanalysis Star Wars. We're looking today at Jedi and Sith role reversals. I'm Reti 4, this is Evan Over 95.
Hello.
And this is Greyjedi 91.
Hey guys.
So yeah, Evan, why don't you introduce us into why we're covering this today?
Okay, so inspiration from this video actually came about from a piece of artwork I found while searching the web the other day, which we will show right now. For those of you who do not know, it is a picture of the Sith characters from the Legacy line of comics, but drawn as if they were Jedi. And that got me thinking about alignments and how certain characters might be if their place in the Force was reversed. And, you know, we were just talking as friends today, trying to discuss what we could do this weekend for a Star Wars-related video, and I brought that up, and Callan and Matt really seemed to like it, so that's what we're bringing to you guys today.
That's right. So to explain how we structured this time around, we decided to choose 3 Lightsiders and 3 Darksiders, and just talk about what, not so much if the characters switched sides, but just who would have been if they had
What would they be like?
What would they be like if they had been written or grew up on the opposing side of their opposing alignments, light and dark there. So like I said, we've got a total of 6 characters, 3 Lightsiders and 3 Darksiders to examine. And we didn't consciously choose this, but it just sort of came about that they happen to fall into the classical 3 archetypes of a warrior, a caster, and something in between. So, for example, with the Sith, that would mean a Sith warrior, a Sith inquisitor, and a Sith sorcerer, basically. And so we do want to encourage discussion and food for thought in the comments. So if there are other characters, we want you to list them for us to do future episodes. Mm-hmm. But we chose our own.
We would love
6
to do more of
around.
these.
Yeah, so if you guys like this idea, don't hesitate to post suggestions, and we'll record more of these episodes in future. But for today, we are looking at Obi-Wan Kenobi, Nomi Sunrider, Zane Carrick, Darth Malgus, Darth Plagueis, and Darth Nihil. And so kicking off our list, we'll start with the Lightsiders first. We agreed? Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll go with, and we will explain for anybody who doesn't know who these characters are briefly, but the first one needs no introduction. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi. So if you don't know who that is, just get out.
Stop watching right now and just go watch the original trilogy.
Right. So Obi-Wan Kenobi, what would he be like as a Darksider? Who wants to kick this off?
Now this one is incredibly difficult to imagine, given Obi-Wan's character. He is like a living conduit for the Force and a firm believer in the, ideals of the Jedi. So to imagine what he would be like as a Sith is just like mind-boggling, which is why we picked it, because it would be so interesting. As for what kind of person he would be, I mean, there's a lot of ways you could go with this. First of all, before we discuss that, I just want to say, can anyone else just imagine like that scene in Phantom Menace where the doors open and Darth Maul's just kind of standing there and he slowly puts his head up? Just imagine that, but with Obi-Wan, and then his head goes up and then he just says, "Hello there."
Oh God.
Sorry, had to put that in there.
Oh, maybe that is what he would be, like Palpatine troll.
Yeah,
like when
perhaps.
Palpatine's just troll, like that's probably, but like where Palpatine is like sort of doing that maliciously, like that would just be Obi-Wan. Like he would just be just like a Sith troll, basically.
It's interesting that you mentioned that scene though, because that's the first and perhaps most significant time that we see Obi-Wan kind of dip into the darker side of his emotions from the loss of Qui-Gon, and that he's just seen and been tormented with. But it also suggests, because one of the things you were mentioning before with how he's a bastion of the Force, and particularly the light side and the Jedi philosophies, one of the main kind of core aspects of Obi-Wan's character that he's renowned for in his own era, as well as from a narrative standpoint, is his passivity with the Force. He is a conduit that lets the living Force flow through, and the amazing feats that he performs are kind of almost incidental as a result of that. Excuse me. Sorry, that was my bad. And that and the transition into the dark side, how would that affect that growth that he went into? Because when he was a Padawan, he wasn't all about that. He was more generic in approach to combat. If he had been from day one a Darksider, I think that his growth would have been significantly different through his use of the Force.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, would he still follow that sort of like opening myself up? Because you can open yourself up to the dark side and have it act through you. It just depends. That the real question is, what would he how would his actions be affected by that change in power?
Mm.
The reason
Because
why
even a Darksider can still use the Force I mean, it's not common, but they can use the Force in a more subtle manner, kind of like Obi-Wan does. So, I'm kind of envisioning something like instead of what he does, like instead of like reversing the drivers in like a mechanical hand, like he did against Vader, he would probably do something more malicious, like maybe like pinch the artery in like someone's heart or something, to give them a heart attack. I don't know.
We spoke about waterbenders yesterday, Matt. Perhaps something along those lines of the internal maliciousness he could have been pulling off.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what I mean is like because again, it's not so much a discussion of if Obi-Wan fell to the dark side, like what would he be like on the dark path from the get-go. And it's sort of like a foreign idea because it's really hard to put yourself in that character's mind because everything Obi-Wan really does is for other people, like right down to even training Anakin. He does that for Qui-Gon. Like when the council tells him to do something, I'm doing this because it's like the council's mandate. Like it's like he doesn't. There's not really like that selfish bone in his body, so it's hard to imagine what would be his motive if he was dark. You know what I mean? And that I think we can just endlessly speculate. I don't think we can truly know.
Yeah.
If it was a question of him being more or less the same character and he would fall to the dark side, that would be more like something along the lines to me of he'd basically be similar to Anakin because I think his reasons would be similar. Trying and failing to hold on to what he does love, but losing himself in the process.
So, you mentioned there love. The whole passion and emotional love side of things with Obi-Wan is one of the significant parts of his character. So, the relationships that he put aside for the sake of the Jedi and the light, he wouldn't have been so inclined to do. So maybe there'd be some.
He'd be a lot more possessive.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. A lot more, like you said, in line with Anakin there, Matt. But at the same time, the relationships that formed from his character as a Jedi, these people wouldn't be drawn to him. So it would be very different on the other side as well. It would redefine his entire character just from this one core change because of how defined he is by his connection to the Force specifically. It's not one of the pragmatic types. Not to say he isn't pragmatic, but his philosophy isn't like, I'm going to use this tool to bring about a great change in the universe. He's just, this is the Force. I'm a part of the Force. I'm going to go along with it, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So yeah, any closing thoughts with that one, or are we going to move on to another character?
I don't want to feel like I don't want to seem like we're not paying him enough time, but it's just like, what can we really say? He is like one of the pillars of light, so it's really hard to imagine him on the dark side. So it's just really tough to expound too far, like when it comes to Obi-Wan.
Definitely. Can we think of a dark side that is akin to him in how he approaches and deals with the Force? Because maybe that would give us some sort of lens to look through. Is there anyone who does just give themselves over to the wild realm of the dark?
I feel like not really. Like it depends in what sense you mean. Surrendering themselves to like the savagery, like, and just unleash their power that the dark side allows you to do, because people like Darth Bane and Sidious and so forth, and Plagueis to an extent, have done that. But the way that Obi-Wan does it is characterized by an acceptance that I am not in control. It's not all about me. It's like the complete antithesis. It's the Jedi version of that. So it's hard to like imagine a Sith using it in the same way. I don't actually know that it can be done with the in that way.
Yeah, it seems a little contradictory.
Yeah, people trying to enforce
how the dark side operates.
Their own perspectives and their own agendas being forced, and the dark side uses a tool kind of thing. It's very rare that you'll see anyone even come close to using it, because they just go with the flow, if you know what I mean.
Even though you asked that question from the perspective of like his approach to the Force, that is the reason why he's so good with Surisu.
Yes, yeah,
right.
Because that's how it channels. The Force is basically guiding his blade more, literally than with other Jedi who let the Force flow with them and they're guided. But Obi-Wan literally just does what the Force tells him to in those moments, because he's so powerfully connected and in trusting of the light side.
In the Revenge of the Sith novelization, which I love, it's more or less described as like the ultimate act of like humility. Like he can let go of himself so thoroughly and like just let the Force take over, that really when he's in motion, it's almost like he's not even doing it. He's so good because it's just it's like an avatar basically. An avatar.
Very much so.
It's kind of tragic as well, because ultimately he must feel very betrayed by the Force for his letting down his ultimate trust. Because the Force essentially enabled or permitted the tragedy of the Jedi's fall.
Well, that's
from a certain point of view, from a certain point of view, of course.
That's in line with the dichotomy of the Force, because the Force is not light or dark. It is both. You know what I mean? It's not working for one or the other, if you know what I mean. At least not in the way that I think it should be. Like George has made comments that like seems like it's like the light side is balanced, but I don't think that that's the most interesting or the most consistent version of the story.
Certainly not for the.
Is it also worth discussing? Is it also worth discussing how like powerful we think a dark Kenobi would be compared to the Kenobi we know?
I mean, it would take a very different form, as we've discussed. But actual level, where would you guys place him?
Well, it's difficult.
I mean, it is hard to say, but see, somebody like Dooku was always like known to be powerful, but I feel like, and if you say, you know, Dooku versus Kenobi, most people would pick Dooku any day. But I feel like if Kenobi was really like unrestrained and just made heavier use of the Force, because he matched Anakin's telekinesis, for example, more or less. But whether or not you agree that that should have been, whether or not it's because of Anakin's compromised mental state, it's still an impressive feat. And even though even though it's not Anakin's apex level, newsflash, he never reaches that. When is he ever apex level? He's always in a compromised state. Like, you know what I mean? And even at that level of power, that feat would have still challenged somebody like Dooku. So if you made Kenobi, if you gave him that sort of uninhibited nature, he'd probably be like a full to half tier beyond like where we normally place him. You know,
and so maybe just above Dooku or around that level.
Around that level, yeah. Like, I mean, in terms of just combative power, like he wouldn't have the same. Like I said, his Sarisa would probably go down because he's not using.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It's the antithesis
completely.
Of the way
Yeah,
it's, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It would be a case of overt combative power. His actual power scale will probably be about the same, if not worse. But the fact that you need less power to unleash more dangerous abilities when it comes to the dark side because of the nature of the dark.
Yeah.
When I think about
probably just beyond Dooku.
Yeah, when I think about it, that's actually like Dooku. I don't want to frame it like, oh, they're complete opposites. But when you look at like their approach during like in the Revenge of the Sith novel. In the Revenge of the Sith novel, Dooku is constantly trying to regain control of the fight and like he's actually like everything is a calculated motion, whereas Kenobi's like when he's fighting. I'm not talking about Dooku versus Kenobi. I'm just talking about their approaches. Kenobi's like completely like relenting and just letting the Force take over. It's like opposite approaches to combat. So if he was going to switch sides, he would have to sacrifice that element of his style completely, the way that Dooku, has.
Agreed. So it's interesting from both the philosophical side and the combative side, mostly because they're with Kenobi in particular. They're so intertwined, in his mastery.
Totally.
But yeah, I think that about covers Obi-Wan. Then should we move on to the second of the Outsiders?
Yes.
So that's Nomi Sunrider.
Yes.
Just a brief description of who she is. She's basically the hero, or the main hero at least, of the original run of Tales of the Jedi. Or is that correct? Like, I guess what's the publishing history
of the era? Probably.
Yeah, on the Jedi side of at least, yeah.
Yeah, and she basically was like. I would call her the rising star of her time, who eventually basically became
Grandmaster.
And in a heavily influential one. During if you don't know, Exar Kun's era. So if you guys haven't read that material, go check that out. But that's who she is.
She's another interesting one because of how she's less tied to the light philosophically, in the way Obi-Wan is.
But
more in terms of her emotional kind of perspective. She grew into the light and the Force in general through her emotional ties and how they were being affected by the situations of the era. So
she's one that
because the relationship to her husband and her daughter really crafted her with like a strong belief in quote unquote light side philosophy. So she was really. I guess the question with her would be like, how would we frame it?
Her motivations
she's like really influenced by her environment, like and the people around her. So,
yeah,
like a dark side version of that would be, I can imagine, because she's really like, the thing with her is like she's really attached to all these people around her. That's like her strength. So I could imagine like a dark side version of her being someone who's really like detached. You know what I mean?
Yeah, her motivations for driving forward with the Force and trying to kind of learn the ways of the light could easily be shifted towards a dark perspective. You can see her character being someone who, through the loss of her family, or at least her husband,
right,
was driven down that path. So it's unlike Obi-Wan, where you can't really fathom how it would manifest solidly. You can easily see someone like Nomi instead being defined by her loss, being shaped by it, but it being instead broken, and that leading to the dark equivalent. It's a lot more. You can see it kind of happening more clearly with her. What do you think?
Yeah, I
Matt?
agree with that. I do agree with that. I think she's like I said, I borderline can't picture a dark Kenobi after a certain point in his life. I can picture a dark side Nomi. You know what I mean? But she is she's motivated by normal concerns. Like she had a family, which in like the modern interpretation of Jedi is not common, but it's because they conceived her character at a time when those rules weren't really established. So she comes across as more human than the average Jedi does from the get-go, and because of that you can see the places where she would crack or fall or like her mind could splinter if you took away the things that are keeping her stable and on the path of light. I could see her but whether you looked at it from a fall to the dark side or just her encountering the wrong group of people at the wrong time in her life and being shown that way. It's kind of like Asajj. Asajj needn't have been on the dark path. Probably wouldn't have been had she, made it to Coruscant and been properly trained. But it's just as easy either way. It's like a 50-50 thing.
Asajj or even Zana in her earlier stages.
I disagree with you on that one. Zana has we've had this argument before, but Zana has a malicious streak from very early on that really has nothing to do with Bane.
Kind of a Azula-esque on that front with Zana. But I don't know, I feel like it would be possible if someone else who was equally powerful came along out of the light, maybe there was a chance. But regardless, the way she forms and how she does, I can easily see applying to Nomi. Someone coming in and shaping her and proving, you've lost your husband. If you were this powerful and had this way about you, you wouldn't have done that. You would have stopped them. Your compassion and your passivity has just lost you your loved one. That would very easily kind of warp her if she wasn't as good as she is.
I could definitely see her initial fear of lightsabers not being a thing. In fact, she might even act a bit more positively towards it.
But like Kenobi, would she be as potent a Force wielder? I mean, she'd certainly have the same strength in the Force, but like her signature ability, the thing that everyone thinks about, is tethered to the light side, that sever Force ability.
Right. Well, you could maybe envision something kind of like like what Jarek has, where he like Force suppression, kind of like using the dark side to like cloud the perceptions of like other Force wielders and not strip them of their Force abilities, but like weaken them. I could see something like that happening. Even
siphoning them, perhaps. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
I mean, her illusionary abilities would just be basically Zana. I can imagine that
another
too.
Comparison to her, for sure.
And then you have her battle meditation, which is like her second big signature ability, which we know can be used by Sith. It's just more malicious.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't bring that one up for that reason. We know Sith can use that, but I just want, because the big thing everyone thinks about when they think of Nomi is what she did to Ulick, of course. But I mean, I guess she would be a very scary, entity on the dark path. You wouldn't want to tangle with her. Certainly not. And in many ways, I suppose that would be not even just probably. I think it would be more crippling if she was like the force of evil rather than Exar Kun.
For sure. Exar Kun flies by the seat of his pants. A motivated with dark intention motivations, Nomi would be a terrifying thought given the scale of her kind of battle level abilities and presence.
Exar Kun was a brilliant warrior, and he was certainly capable and powerful. But Nomi, if you really gave her the tools, like she could be in the vein of somebody more like Palpatine, like a grand scale manipulator.
Absolutely. I mean, she does kind of shape her era on the political spectrum. The Jedi Order. She becomes effectively the first kind of Grand Master of her ilk. Yeah, it would be very interesting to see.
I know this is a weird phrase to use like with Darksiders, but she'd be a lot more measured than Exar Kun was. I
think that's exactly right. Yeah, she'd have her motivations and passions wouldn't blind her to the pragmatic side of things. It's akin to the likes of Plagueis and his types. Not to the same way because obviously he's scientist, she's not. But that kind of conscious awareness of what she's doing and when and why. She wouldn't just be, I'm going to do this because the dark side is evil. There would be reasons for things, and those reasons would not be pleasant if she was an evil person.
No.
Another interesting thing to consider would be the effects on Vima as well, because she's one of my favorite characters.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah,
and it's actually an interesting topic, full stop, because we don't really see parent kind of relationships in Star Wars from the Sith perspective. Not to any great extent, at any rate.
No, not to a great extent, but like, not really. It's interesting that this, was sparked by like a picture of Legacy, and like Warlock had a daughter that he actually seemed to care about, and I would imagine that Nomi would still care about her daughter. It would be rooted in something a little bit more,
possessive, like kind of
possessive, maybe, but also
maybe
but
not
also
possessive, but more like.
Well, people like this. People of that kind that are evil or dark or whatever, they tend to be concerned with like their legacy. So if nothing else, protection of my daughter, it gives me a grasp on the future. Like, like we can own the future. Like through you. Like join me and together we'll rule. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That kind of
mother
thing.
And daughter.
Never again will a loved one be lost, because I will control everything and pull the strings and make sure that this is how things are. That loss of her husband would be, I think, a dramatic influence on her kind of shaping as a dark sider. As it was with the light, it's the same sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting. She'd be a lot more of a galactic.
It really goes to show like how drastic an effect loss can have.
But also just the whole idea of flipping someone's light and dark. With Obi-Wan, it would be a lot more it would affect his personal presence in the universe. But with someone like Nomi, her actual
it would affect the galaxy.
Yeah, it would affect the galaxy more than her, because she's shifting. Yes, she'd be very different, but that wouldn't affect her. Like we said with Obi-Wan, maybe his Cerisi would go down. He'd get weaker in some areas and stronger in others. With Nomi, she'd effectively just be the same on the flipped side of the spectrum.
Yeah,
her galactic impact would be the focus.
That's the thing, because Obi-Wan, even if you can fathom like the idea of a dark side Obi-Wan, it would be somebody who would be subservient to another Dark Lord. Like he would not be the reigning Dark Lord. He would not be the grand scale manipulator ruler. He would even a dark version of him. He wouldn't have an interest in that.
He would be almost more like Darth Maul, but not a stooge, but like the non-stooge equivalent of him.
Yeah, like maybe more like a scourge thing.
Yes,
something like that.
Yeah, much better comparison.
He would be a highly capable operative within a functioning Sith empire, but he would not be like at the head of it. Whereas Nomi would.
It's interesting actually.
He'd make it.
Sorry, I know we're talking about Nomi for a second, but just jumping back, you said functioning Sith empire. His appreciation for the kind of construct and mandates of the Council. It would be interesting to see whether that shifts over to the dark side, whether he would be the one in for a dark council kind of situation.
No, I could definitely see like Dark Obi-Wan being a lot like Scourge, and being Scourge just being like Emperor's Wrath and kind of trying to keep everyone in line, because he'd still be maintaining that order that he loves so much. I could definitely see a Scourge thing. In fact, that could be you asked earlier, Count, like what equivalent would a Dark Obi-Wan be to another Sith? I mean, obviously Scourge is very different than what it would actually be, but like closest possible equivalent could be something like that.
In terms of philosophical perspective, if not manifestation, yeah, definitely. But
maybe not philosophical perspective, but more like function is what I'm saying. Scourge, the way Scourge's place in the Empire would be very much what I can imagine a Dark Obi-Wan being.
Yeah, how
the idea of him on that alignment definitely lends more toward a Sith Empire's setting than something like Rule of Two lineage.
Absolutely, because Rule of Two requires a lot of personal drive and ambition and passion, which Obi-Wan, even evil, I don't think would have. He's a lot more with the flow style.
Exactly. But anyway, back to Nomi would just be Empress of Darkness.
She would be Empress Sunrider. There's no question of that in my mind. Just from the nature of how her motivation would shape her moving forward. For sure.
And in my most objective, sort of analysis or fan perspective, I could actually see her not being terrible at it. You know, like definitely, like if you're on the dark path, there's going to be like some sinister. I wouldn't want to live in that world, but it's like lesser of two evils. I'd rather deal with my idea of a dark Nomi controlling my life than say Palpatine.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Yeah.
because
she would be like, more like a Tywin, where like it's hard-handed and iron fist, but there's a fairness to it. There's a sense to it. It's not just me, and like everyone else doesn't matter.
There's a balance. There's a measured system in place that kind of doesn't necessarily benefit everyone because that's not how they would think, but it would at least function, reasonably well, and give you that security overall. They're not anarchists, basically, which Palpatine, to an extent, he would happily just go, the planet has been blown up, isn't this fun? And doesn't care about the effect it would have on the galaxy because who cares? He can stop whatever happens, right? That kind of thing.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's Nomi's done. Unless you have any other closing thoughts on her.
No,
I think that sums it up pretty well. Yeah. So
here's our final light sider is Zane Carrick.
Yeah, a bit of a different one.
Yes. This is a bit. Yeah.
Should we explain who he is real quick, just in case anyone doesn't know?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he's the protagonist of the. I guess it's not the first comic of this line. It's not the only thing called Knights of the Old Republic. I guess the second comic series to be named.
Yeah, something like that.
But yeah, he's the main protagonist. He's the one that he's the Jedi Padawan that dealt with the Jedi Covenant, which many of us have referenced on our channels extensively. It's a very good story. If you haven't read it, you should go see it. It's one of the best runs of comics in the EU, in our opinion, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so go see that if you haven't seen it already. But the thing about Zane, that if you're not familiar with his character, is that he's painfully inadequate, and has a sort of unique relationship with the Force that is termed as luck, that just sort of seems to get him out of impossible situations constantly.
Yeah, no, definitely.
He's also not really bound by like the rules of the Order. He's kind of more of a freelance sort of Force wielder who just kind of does right things at certain times.
That's a good lead into the irony of this discussion. Is much like Obi-Wan, it's almost impossible to picture a dark Zane because he is characterized by nothing but like sort of
his kind of personality, if nothing else. His face.
Yeah. But I mean,
he's very forthright, if you know what I mean. So what we see from him is the kind of Zane character presenting to the universe. There's no like inner secrets that he'll just keep from everyone that would be able to twist his motivations or anything. He is as he does. So if he was a dark side and doing as he does, how would that manifest?
He's an unfailing.
Well, that's the thing. It's like he's written to be a very sympathetic character. I mean, like we said, he's a guy who he's not going to be bound by the rules of the Order. He just goes out and does good things. So, if he were dark, it would just be,
It's largely because the Order betrays him. Like at least his pocket of their Order. But I mean, he is just. I called Obi-Wan and Nomi both are like these sort of pillars of light. Zane is another one. He's just nowhere near as powerful. But like everything, he's unfailingly good. So it's really weird to think about him on the dark side, and also because he's bumbling.
That's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
Difficult to imagine that from the dark side perspective. How that would manifest, because we said, like you said, about his Force luck. I'm of the mind where instead of the Force influencing things to positively affect him as he's bumbling through life, it would instead be a case of as he's bumbling through life, bad luck is affecting everyone around him. It would be more like that kind of manifestation, which would shape his character, I think, quite enormously.
He'd be a jinx.
Yeah, that exactly. Yeah,
he'd
be accidentally just negatively impacting everyone around him, and that would probably be how his kind of darkness is shaped.
You know what sucks about that is that means that he would not function in the Sith Empire. He would need to be like he can't have nobody would want him around. They're like, you need to go
because they can't even make use of his power because they don't know how it's going to sporadically manifest.
You are hereby banished. You must leave at once. Yeah.
It would be interesting because he wouldn't. It would be an example, one of the rare instances where his darkness would be born from the nature of his inherent power. Like he doesn't get much of a choice. He can't become friends with people. He can't form connections with positive or negative influences, any kind of influence, because he's just going to ruin everything around him.
Well, he would be.
And that would probably really mess him up psychologically.
Yeah, he would be so detached and.
I was gonna say he'd be more likely to be depressed than actually evil. You know, he'd just be. He'd be like Setharth if Setharth wasn't waltzing through life whistling. Like he'd be like a sad Setharth.
Yeah, the Setharth is definitely we made it before recording that he is the kind of closest comparison you'd have for a dark side Zane. And even it doesn't match with the whole bumbling side, because like you said, he's whistling through life, and he's reasonably competent.
He is very competent. The problem was he was tangling with Rule of Two Sith, and he wasn't prepared for that. He was perfectly suited to the lifestyle he was leading before Xana interfered with it and tried to hijack it from him. Yeah.
And even after that, he wound up becoming immortal. So
he was he's always been one of my favorite Sith, not Sith, but Darksiders.
Yeah, you can't even call him. Yeah,
yeah, he's the fact that he kind of achieves more than most other Sith Lords put together, and he's so casual about it. You know, it's like, oh, I guess I'll use this then. It's so opportunistic and lucky. You know.
Well, yeah, but like Dark Zane wouldn't have that kind of luck, obviously. So I can't see Dark Zane having a happy ending, no matter what happens to him.
I think it would be a long life, though. That would be part of the irony. Like, he would be long-lived, and he would have a lot of experience. It just, none of it would be in his favor. Like, as he gets stronger and stronger in the Force, it would only get worse and worse. You know,
we have all these tired, old, depressed, isolated Jedi hermits. Do we have any Sith versions of that? Because I think he would probably be like, if there aren't any, he'd be striking out a new path. Like, he'd be the first. Like, I'm the first Sith to just be tired and depressed and done with everything.
Is sitting in like an old wasteland kind of style hut cave, something in a wasteland planet, and there would be constant earthquakes that would knock the rocks down. It's like, God darn it, you know, everything around him would just be unlucky, and he'd have to deal with that. And I think that would be the biggest example of how he would be shaped. I mean, looking at him without that, keeping his ability purely on the good fortune side, do you reckon that you can see a dark side character?
It's really tough because his defining trait is basically altruism.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, how would that be flipped?
He's not. I don't know. Like, that's what I mean. It's like it's not even, because we can even with Obi-Wan we struggled, but we're like, well, he does have like these attachments, or he does, like, you know, you can kind of sort of piece together a very foreign but solid picture of a dark side Obi-Wan. Zane, even with the image of him like wearing the talisman, it still doesn't look. It's just it's weird. Even though we have a visual of what a dark side Zane would look like, in spirit, I can't comprehend it.
Yeah, it's really tricky.
Post in the comments below what you guys think on this one. Well, all of them, of course, but Carrick in particular. How would you think that would manifest without the kind of presupposition that we've given about the dark side luck shift being flipped as well? Because it's an interesting one. But with that said, do you want to move on to the dark side list then?
Yeah,
I think we've covered everything. Yeah, let's do it.
Including our list of lightsiders, we'll begin with our Sith warrior, Darth Malgus. I would imagine most people know who this is, but if you, on the off chance that you don't, he's the Sith from the first 3 Old Republic trailers. He had his own novel, which is called SWTOR Deceived. Really good book, by the way, in my opinion. I think you should read it. And he's an influential character in that video game for like the first arc or whatever. Anyway, probably the most recognizable Sith of his era, I would say, at least if you're a casual fan. But yeah, so this is basically a character that was deemed at first to basically be a rip-off version of Vader, which I disagree with. I just want to say that. I mean, I can see it in his just his MO, like the way he conducts himself and the way that he looks, but otherwise I don't agree with that. But yeah, how do we think that Malgus would manifest as a lightsider?
Well, it's interesting because the way he views the Force, because the thing with Malgus is he views conflict as the fundamental nature of the Force itself, you know, when he's a darksider, obviously. So it's interesting to think how that would manifest.
He'd be a big peacetime Jedi.
Yeah, but that's what
the
I mean.
Diplomat on the light side.
But these are not. That's an interesting thing in this discussion. We're not taking their opposites. We're taking their inverse. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Like he would not be, because I'm a warrior and I have to be all airy fairy and peaceful over here. It would be.
Right.
he would be just as on the ball when it comes to warfare. Like he probably would still view conflict as the nature of the galaxy, but it's like I'm going to
especially given the
prevent
era he'd be operating in.
Yeah,
I can actually see. I can actually. Sorry.
He would basically be a very stalwart Jedi guardian, you know, like ready,
Totally.
like for the next conflict, you know. And in my opinion, even though I just said that I don't think he's a ripoff of Vader, he would be closer to my ideal picture of what Anakin Skywalker should have been portrayed like during the Clone Wars, like a fully realized Jedi, a good man, but one who's blinded, you know, by like this relentless pursuit of darkness, and just you know, there's that sort of tragic element to him, you know.
That focused kind of drive against the nature of what he sees the universe as. You know, he's constantly trying to be the best in this situation because he's like, the world is conflict, galaxy is conflict, war. We have to win the war because
Soldier.
Combination. A combination of like Anakin and his strengths and flaws, and General Hoth and his strengths and flaws. To me, is basically what a light side Malgus would be.
Yeah, it's very good.
Completely,
Lord Hoth is.
yes.
I would draw a lot of similarities of Lord Hoth with him actually. I mean, how it you know the kind of archetype that he would manifest as. Yeah, because his drive he revels in the joys of warfare as a Darksider, but I think it would be more with. I think
that's putting it mildly.
Yeah, I think it would be more to do with reveling in the kind of physical exertion and kind of competition on the light. You know, similar in akin to Mace Windu, being that kind of reining in the darker tendencies of his enjoyment.
What's also interesting to discuss would be his relationship to Alina. You know, his quote unquote girlfriend, you know. Obviously, like, let's just assume for the moment that like Alina is also on the light side with him. I think that, like, obviously I think their relationship would be a lot, you know, healthier for starters, you know.
I don't think I think I'll tack on to that what you're saying, Evan, but I just want to address what Callan said a minute ago with like the Windu aspect. I do think he would be basically like the Windu of his time, because Windu has he has flaws of his own, but they're all rooted in like a good cause, you know. But the thing is, I think Windu would have more discipline, so I don't think this guy would be like a Vapad, you know. I don't think he would be open to that, which is why I mean like the Anakin flaws, and also with the Hoth flaws, I think that rather than reveling in the fight, he would see it as a sad necessity of his duty. Like that would, like Hoth, it would drag him down. Hoth didn't enjoy any part of that. It almost broke him as a person. That's who he would be. Like he would be like in Alina might, as long as she's in his life, that might be the thing that gives him, kind of like Padme and Anakin, the thing that gives him like the light or the strength to keep going
carry on.
Yeah, but because if he didn't have that, I could see him being fragile. Because in his way, Hoth was, you know, like especially we saw how the death of like his friend Pernikar affected him. Yeah, and I'm not a big Hoth fan for this reason, because I'm critical of the character. He's an interesting character. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not one of his fans. But I do think that that's an interesting character and one in line with who Malgus would be if he were a Jedi.
Yeah, I completely agree. Hoth is, I think, the biggest, with Flavor of Anakin, Flavor of Mace, the biggest example of how it would look like for Malgus. I definitely agree that he would not be a Varpad type. You're absolutely right. Discipline is not Malgus' specialty. He's refined. He's not elegant, wrong word, but he's brutal in his efficiency. But
brutal efficiency.
Yeah, that's again more Anakin style. It's not Mace in terms of the perspective. I just meant purely on the enjoyment of competition. You know, how his drive would be shaped in the light for that specifically. But yeah, Hoth is I think the best closest comparison you'd get for sure. And you were saying about Alina specifically, Evan, and how she'd kind of be like a tether for him.
No, yeah, she would be the thing that kept him from breaking. You know, I could definitely see that. You know, especially with the whole necessary viewing conflict as like a necessary evil. I could see Alina really being his anchor, because even in the Deceived book, he talks about Alina, where like he does care about Alina, but he also views her as like his weakness. You know, the one thing that he's, you know, that's dragging him down. And I'm not gonna spoil how that ends in the book, but let's just say certain things get resolved in that relationship by the end of it.
Kind of like Zahir from Korra.
Exactly like that. Which is interesting because even a Jedi would view it the same way. That's the reason you're not allowed to have attachment. You know, but in their way, the Jedi.
Vulnerability.
The Jedi as often as they're right, they're wrong about that. Like if you have the right couple, the right personality types, that can be all that keeps them together and on the light path, and the thing that makes them as capable as they are. In his case, like Anakin, it probably wouldn't ultimately work out. And if she died, like he'd be in big trouble because
that'd be
that's
bad,
like
yeah.
that's his anchor, or even if she just left him, like without that purpose, that personal connection. So whether he's light or dark, that relationship to Elena would still be a weakness of sorts, just from different perspectives.
Right.
I completely agree.
Completely agree.
So
all right, well, I
that's
think that
Malgus,
covers.
yeah.
It was Malgus.
So next we have Darth Plagueis. Now I just want to say real quick, and if you don't know who that is at this point, then I don't know what to tell you. Much like Obi-Wan.
Have you ever heard the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
Exactly.
You're gonna say that, God. We
We
just did a video on him too. Like,
but yeah, so he needs no introduction, I don't think, as Palpatine's master. But this is, and that kind of leads into it. This guy was Palpatine's master. I can't really fathom a light side version of Plagueis. I just want to say that for that reason, I wasn't sure we should even analyze this, but we, as a group, as a trio here, we decided that question in and of itself was interesting. So that's why he's on the list this time around. But I will go ahead and say I'm not sure that Plagueis' psychology would enable him not merely to adopt the principles of the Jedi Order, because that's like a flat out no, but even be aligned with the light side. I think that's a sketchy. I'm not sure. Maybe you guys can convince me.
Well, the reason we were doubtful about
it's
his
difficult,
inclusion,
especially when you consider his origins.
Yeah, the reason we were doubtful about his inclusion on this is because he's not so much well, I mean, he is an evil person, but he's an evil person based on his actions and based on his effect on the galaxy and those around him. He's not an evil person based on his motivation. He is amoral. He's not immoral. He doesn't. He revels in cruelty and such, but it's usually and that's when it gets personal, which would be something that would be switched in this instance of him being light. But he wouldn't. He'd be far more neutral than good.
Yeah.
He's always going to be neutral at best, in my opinion.
He's close to neutral as it is, but it's like if you looked at it like a KOTOR character sheet, like he would be gray tinged with red. You know what I mean? Anyway, I can't really picture him gray tinged with blue, but I can picture him just gray, like a Kaminoan.
Yeah, Kaminoan for sure.
I think
would be a good comparison.
Kaminoan would be a example.
I mean, he gets along with them well. I mean, in the book itself,
he does.
He appreciates their philosophy.
Sort of. Well, he gets along with them, but like even he is a little bit put off by just how detached they are.
No, I thought he enjoyed that. He called it like a Sith-like detachment, like it's like a strength, like their ability to not be affected by what they're doing and their sketchy experiments, and allows them to innovate more.
Yeah, but with the
I guess it's just interpretation of the book.
Yeah, the ability of them to kind of then make something of that drive, and that devoid, empathy.
I'm pretty positive that he envied, or not envied, but
appreciated.
What's the word?
Appreciated
it. That's where he found his commonality. Like, he calls it Sith-like. It's like if it weren't Sith-like, it wouldn't be worth celebrating.
A good point.
Which is interesting, how he's less focused on. Well, no, it's not true either than that, but. He's one of those people that applies his pragmatic and personal view on the way the universe should work, not even how it does work, but how it should work, onto his ideas of the dark side and the Sith Order. He would very quickly just cast aside all that is the Sith if he thought it wasn't right. He agrees with it based on his personal views rather than, oh yes, I'm reading into this and I'm agreeing with, I'm taking this on, if you know what I mean. He kind of sees a detachment between himself and that, as he does with all things. Having that perspective shifted to the light wouldn't really change much.
Well, I can't. That's not a light perspective, though.
No,
if you know what I mean. Like, I just can't. I don't understand how that would manifest in that framework. I mean, yes, you get Jedi arrogance, but it's usually just short-sightedness, or based on like assumption, like Jocasta knew, saying nothing exists outside of the library. But that's not evil. That's just a dumb thing to think. Yeah. It's not. There's nothing malicious about that, and her saying that doesn't hurt anybody. He is like you said, like he's so tied to his vision for how the galaxy should work or what should be going on. He was always going to be taking proactive steps to bring that galaxy into being. I just can't see him on the light side. I can see him as a neutral, clinical,
just ego to mask, effectively.
Yes.
Like, well, I completely agree with that. It's how much I'm willing to push him towards the light. I'm trying to picture some sort of scenario.
That's what I mean. It's like, that's the question. That's the question. Is like, what would even the immune like psychology is not conducive to. They're so inherently selfish. It's almost part of their DNA.
Which is why, like, as far as I know, there's never even been a immune Jedi.
I agree. I don't know of immune Jedi.
That would be strange. True. I think immune Jedi would probably manifest somewhere along the lines of kind of a Mordin Solus from Mass Effect.
Possibly, perhaps. But I think for that to even be remotely true, it has to be immune that was
not Damask, because Damask is not a typical immune.
Yeah, but not raised by even munes. Not even just like just their, which I mean I guess that goes without saying because every child is supposedly taken as an infant. But you know what I mean? It's like it's a necessity. Like it's an absolute necessity that mune child not have contact with or even an understanding of its own native culture. Yeah, yeah, because it's just not. It's the opposite of like what Jedi stand for.
It's amoral incarnate, and so easily shifted to morality.
Yeah, so if Plagueis had been taken as an infant and raised in the Jedi Temple, he'd be completely different. He wouldn't even resemble typical Mune.
Even then, he would be questioning, though. He's an inquisitive mind, full stop. So he would be the one questioning every order, every possible kind of motive around.
I mean, I think that would depend, like. Yeah, but you could be inquisitive and like still be a Jedi. I think it might also depend on who his master ended up being, because some masters can take that inquisitiveness and turn it into something,
I'm gonna backtrack and say I guess if you raised him in the order, he probably would have turned out something like Dooku, who was in some ways always doomed to change sides.
That's one thing. Like it's a question of his core like biological character, who this person would be, what are his base kind of motivations and instincts. Because if you raise him like that, and he's going to be inquisitive, he's going to be like Dooku, he's going to be questioning. The question you have to ask then on top of that is, where does that questioning lead his kind of perspective in the end? And I can't see it being good.
Well, I guess it's just a question like, what if Dooku had never been swayed by Sidious? How would have he?
But that's kind of what I'm getting at. I was just going to say I don't believe Dooku was ever truly good. Like I think while he may have fought for that side, while he may have carried out spent the majority of his life on that side, I don't think in his heart he really was. I think the Revenge of the Sith novel even says that he's never truly understood friendship. You know what I mean? Even when he was a Padawan. So I mean, it's something that I'm not saying he was like this unchecked beast, who was completely evil, but I don't think he was ever truly good himself.
Psychopathy, that kind of little, that distinction.
Yeah, and so if you had a light side Plagueis, I guess it would just be a Jedi Plagueis who's eventually going to wake up to the fact that this isn't really for me.
He'd be one of the lost 20. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so that's a good explanation there.
But there would be they are implied to have had good reasons for leaving. His would be more like Dooku's, a little bit more sinister, I think.
How do you think his power would be affected? Because I can't see him manifesting much power in the light for the very reasons we've stated. You have to have a kind of connection to the world around you, and not in a selflessness in.
Might well be the reason he leaves. That might well be the reason, because he can see the potential that he's not being allowed to use. That's part of what Dooku was talking about in the Plagueis book. He mentioned that.
Yeah, but I definitely think he'd be weaker.
Of course, but that's kind of why he would leave.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just like
he would still have all that potential, and he'd realize he has that potential. I think, and most Jedi probably do. They just don't care. Because they're happy to serve in the capacity that they do. He wouldn't be so.
It comes down to that core motivation, the question of why Dooku doesn't understand the question of, make me my flower from Yoda. He's like, but this is ridiculous. It's like, no, that's very core root rose. Yeah, I want this rose. That's what I'm trying to follow, and that's my passion, and that's my focus. Like yours isn't. That's why you're not getting this.
Just want to point out to the viewers who don't know what you're referencing, that's from Yoda Dark Rendezvous, which is a fantastic book. You should read it.
My favorite Star Wars book, full stop, actually, that one.
There it is. Go get that one if you haven't read it, people.
Best Yoda interpretation, full stop.
I agree with that.
Since Empire, yeah.
Even on top
I
of
think
that,
even including, yeah.
I'm just saying, like, since Empire.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Nothing comes close outside of Empire, but I think it's even better than that.
Yeah.
So if you need any more reason to read it, then there you go. But yeah, that's Plagueis and Damask covered, I guess. Unless you have any final thoughts.
Should we touch on the whole resurrecting of the dead thing?
Oh, that just wouldn't be a thing.
Yeah, that passion for immortality, I don't think would necessarily be there. It wouldn't really occur to him.
Well, do you think his fear of death would be lessened?
I can't.
I think.
I can't imagine.
I think it would.
Sorry.
All right, go ahead.
I can't imagine a
ahead.
Jedi raised person fearing death to the extent that Plagueis appears.
Oh
to.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would definitely
even he's disagreeing with every other point. I think the way they would introduce him to the perspective on life, I think that would at the very least severely handicap his drive towards immortality.
I think it's such an ingrained fear. You know, it's like intrinsic to his character, the way it is for Voldemort or Tom Riddle, that probably like Tom Riddle, he would go along with what you're supposed to say and do to graduate to the certain level, but that wouldn't be something he ever truly adopted. Because if he could, he wouldn't be a Sith. If he could, he would be like a functioning. No Jedi can fear death. No true Jedi can. It's against their core tenets. I don't care what perspective you look at it. That's a fail, and the Council wouldn't promote you to the rank of knight.
Yeah, agreed. It would be very much like that. Again, the sociopathy and that amorality touch. Riddle is a excellent comparison, actually.
Because Dooku is not the sort that's like, yeah, I'll sacrifice myself for the greater good. He wants to continue to live. You know, like he has that root in the physical or profane world, as the Plagueis book termed it. Like he thought he'd be living large, after the war.
Yeah,
you know? But yeah.
And
anyway,
he was promoted though. So there's that question there. You said about how the council.
That's what I mean. I like Tom Riddle. You say what you need to say to pass through the goody two shoes that control your destiny at a certain level, and then after that you go ahead and do your own thing. Yeah. That's exactly what I imagine Dooku did. I don't think he ever accepted a great many of the Order's core tenets. That's why he was in such conflict with them. I think it was stated that he wasn't included on the council for that reason.
Well, he declined. They offered, but he declined because he wanted to devote himself.
Declined for that reason in some way. I think he doesn't truly respect their opinions or doesn't want to be bound by their rules or codes.
Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, I think it would be very much the case with Plagueis for sure. Mm-hmm. It's interesting though. It's interesting that we can't even give him like a flavor of goodness because it's so inherently opposed to not just his character. But
maybe the people watching will have a better idea.
Yeah, put some suggestions down below, seeing how you think it would look, guys, and whether or not you can do that without completely removing everything that is Plagueis from him. I mean,
no fan fiction here. I mean, but it is hard to do because he is Palpatine's master. He's one of the definitive Sith Lords.
Yeah. But well, that brings us to our final. I would say contestant then, but final character.
Contestant. He'd be a loser. He'd definitely lose. So basically what we have here is just completing that sort of triumvirate of the different classes that you typically find. So we decided on Nihil as something in between the sorcerer type and the warrior type. So Darth Nihil of the Legacy era. Yeah. So this guy, in the books at least, in the comic books that where he's prominent, his defining trait is basically ambition, and also like a sense of having been passed over and sort of neglected in favor of others based on his birth status or lack of birth status, I suppose.
Because he began life as a warlord before being recruited by the Sith, which is one of the reasons he has such a drive to rule.
Yeah. Now, a character like that, I suppose really like going hand in hand with those two things that we've just mentioned. I guess it also means that he comes with a lot of grit and determination, which are easily focused in the light or rooted in the light sided alignment as well. So he's not so alien to me. I could see a Jedi Nile if he was raised by the. He would always look creepy, even in this photo, in this picture we see. Like he's always going to look unsettling, but that's just the nature of his species.
I see him being very, as you mentioned before, very kind of try-hardish. He's going to be the Sindralic kind of persona of visually and kind of how he holds himself and how he composes himself. But inside, he's going to be a Dooku wannabe. He's going to be trying to reach for every new level of power and distinction that he can, and ultimately not achieving it, which would be interesting to see how that would affect him if he was good, rather than chasing evilness.
The only reason why that's so is not so much because he lacks ability. He's just not Dooku's level of ability. Like, this guy's no Dooku.
He is skilled, but just the problem was he's in the Legacy comics. He's consistently put up against opponents who are either way below him or way above him. So he either completely destroys his opponents or gets destroyed. There's very little middle ground with his performance.
Yeah, so he would be colored by like that sense of competitiveness, that you find in someone like Dooku. He just wouldn't have the same actual level of ability, so he'd cap out somewhere. And really, what would be the point of? He would make a fantastic operative or field agent. I don't know that he would be an especially engaging or interesting character.
Because since the Jedi don't really place any emphasis on birth status, his trait of being passed over wouldn't be an issue. It wouldn't matter.
True.
To the Jedi.
Yeah, that's true. He would just have.
He wouldn't be held in any less or any more regard because of it.
Yeah, he would just probably. I guess in all likelihood, now that you say that, most likely for him, he'd just kind of become an average Jedi, or at least the average in the sense of. Probably more powerful than average, but I mean, his goals or his character development would probably be a standard Jedi life.
Fit that kind of general.
But with like a lot of with like determination sprinkled in, because I don't know. I could either see him being a really competent field agent or like a really competent like temple guard, not like the actual Sentinel guards, but like kind of like how Shaak Ti was kind of placed in charge of like defending the temple when Mace tried to arrest Palpatine. I could see him filling that role fairly well.
I definitely agree. Definitely agree that he's better than your average Jedi, and he has abilities, and he'd function well in several capacities. I just don't think he has that. I don't think he has that interesting defining trait like Qui-Gon is the Maverick. You know what I mean? Mace Windu has like this deep insight. Obi-Wan is like just this expression of like humility and Jedi dumb. Like Niall would just he's a Jedi. I don't know what his he's the Jedi of this quality. Like he'd just be.
I completely
Niall.
agree. I think he would be fit. He would fit into the average Jedi's typical mold a lot more freely than some people who have their own kind of core characteristics that help define them as who they are. But going along with that, I think he would be someone that is heavily shaped by his master. Depending on who you wanted to place him under, I think that would vastly determine how he ended up turning out in the end, both in his skill level and his perspective. Yeah. He would be someone that you could choose specific masters, and his end result would be vastly
That's interesting
different.
though. When I think about Ashrad Het, because Ashrad, he wasn't exactly wrong for this, but like when his Padawan did die, he was over it. Like I'm focused on the needs of the moment, and we're still going through a war, and my Padawan, I think his name was Bot Jewel, like he died in a Clone Wars battle, and he's like, yeah, he passed, and it's sad, but I got to move on. And like Anakin just could not relate to that. So like, it's funny that even if Niall was apprenticed to Jedi Crate still wouldn't care that much about him, like relative to like, it's like, yeah, well, he's my student, but whatevs,
Well, we'll do. Well, if people request it, we'll cover Crate in another one of these.
You don't have to do him. Like, I mean, he is like we have Jedi version of him and Sith version of him.
But I meant like I'm talking like someone like with Crate's like maturity and experience, because Ashrad was fairly young when the Order fell.
There are a lot of characters, of course, that have flip sides on both, that have dipped in to light and dark on both sides of the spectrum that will need covering less. So it's probably more interesting to stick to the characters that haven't had them shown, but we can do both. Who would you choose to place Niall under? Who would you think would make a good master. I mean, there are many people that we find. He's not someone like Anakin who is just a bomb waiting to go off if you give him the wrong master. But he, the people that would bring him out, perhaps into the best he could be.
You need just somebody who's going to give him the time of day and treat him with a lot of compassion and empathy, because he doesn't know that.
He's motivated by a lot of what's the word? There's a term for it. When you are not needy, but the psychological term for when someone needs that kind of nurturing. I can't think of the term, but there's one exists. I think it is a lot of nurturing, this person, and that's why he's kind of moldable depending on his situation and his upbringing.
Maybe someone like Oppo Rancisis or
Oppo would be good. Oppo would be good for him. That would be a mind opener of a master, I think.
He's very stern.
He's stern, but
he's also fair.
Who has a lot of compassion? Who has a lot of compassion that would work with Nile?
I'm thinking. I'm trying to think like probably like a female Jedi master would be good for him.
Trasa
should be great. She's actually be good for anybody. I think. Like I'm serious when I say that.
She's awesome.
He would benefit from a mother figure for sure.
Yeah, Trasa.
But yeah, there's those that could be.
The thing about Trasa is because she's so long lived. That like she knows how, but this gets into like the topic of the video that we're planning. Like she knows how to express that idea of like, you are a Jedi and like your life is in some ways sacrifice, and like our duty is bigger than us. But at the same time, she can treat you like you're a human being. She knows how to relate to you. Yeah. She'll have that talk with you to make you feel better.
She definitely needs to go in that video. We'll mention that. We'll mention that in that when it comes up. I'm going to park that idea for sure.
Yoda could have learned. I'm just going to say as a preview for a future video that we're planning. Yoda could have learned some lessons from Trasa when it comes to relating to students.
Absolutely.
Yeah, ain't that the truth? But yeah, we'll get into that.
Anything more for Niall, or are we about ready to wrap up now?
I think that's about it. That's I think for me anyway.
Likewise.
I think do you think he'd still have the pike?
I see no reason why
not.
Yeah,
no reason not to. I mean, the Jedi are a lot less, a lot more conventional when it comes to the initial sparks for the character. You here use the lightsaber. It comes down to the individual whether or not they would then innovate with that. They're not kind of pushed towards innovation the same way that the more unique Sith are. But I think there's no reason you couldn't just go, oh yeah, this is cool.
I don't think he's especially limited because he chooses to use a pike. I think the fact that he uses that combined with like his own like sort of improvised style. Yeah. Well, like I mean, he's not like a Jedi weapons master could probably teach him how to better use it, in my opinion.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah. So
if anything, he'd probably just be a more effective warrior, at least on that front. Not with force powers, I don't think,
absolutely.
But in terms of dueling skill, he'd probably be better equipped.
He'd benefit from that everyday routine of constantly being, refined and improved and pushed towards, self-reflection and everything. That would definitely affect him massively, I think, in that environment. Although we have been putting him more towards Clone Wars era temple, so previous different Jedi generations would probably have a different effect.
I got the impression that he was one of those kind of characters that he probably always used a spear or a pike sort of weapon, and then because he gained his reputation well into adulthood, basically as a warlord on his own planet, as you mentioned, Evan. So to me, it was like in the fact that Krayt brought him into the Empire or the One Sith, but didn't actually with open arms do so. He always felt different from like his peers, so he probably just doubled down on that with like, I'm going to use my own style and my own weapon, whereas like a Jedi would be like, well, here's how you can do it better. Like you don't need to do it our traditional way, but we have millennia for you to draw on in terms of experience and the different ways that you can apply it, and we're including you, we're not shunning you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you're right there. It'd be interesting to see all of these characters, and I think it's one of the most interesting things about this kind of thought experiment is that all of these characters, simple shift, well, I say simple, huge, but effectively simple shift in their kind of perspective, their morality, who they are at their core, can bring out so many amazing stories. I don't know about you guys, but I would love to see an Empress Sunrider story, whatever.
Yeah, like as we were talking,
very interesting.
As we were talking about this, that one appealed to me along with the Malgus one, the Jedi Malgus.
Yeah,
because like I said, because that appeals to me because it's in line with like what I wanted Anakin's tragedy to be had it been better written.
Yeah, there are so many different stories and emotional kind of explorations that are open to be dived into. It's a shame that we won't get them. I like what if stories for that reason. The fact I wouldn't want this necessarily to be the main canon example of what happens, but not that that exists anymore. But I would want to see it happen. To see how it would look. It would be an interesting on all fronts.
I like what ifs like this that are grounded in who the characters already are, as opposed to just straight up fan fiction that can get just harebrained real quickly. So I enjoyed this. This was a very fun thought experiment for me as well.
Yeah, very interesting.
But I hope you guys enjoyed. Please post any suggestions you have for yourself on these characters as well. But if you want us to cover any particular character in mind that you want to see done this way, put your ideas down below and we'll have a look at that for future videos.
Totally.
We can make this a regular feature if you guys want. Just show interest and give us some suggestions of who you want to see. We'll do more in the future.
Absolutely. But with that said, I think that's us wrapped up. I am Reti 4 and I still don't have an outro.
Who's next? Me? Greyjedi 91. Bye-bye, guys.
Oh, dear. Evanova 95, we hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you guys later.
Goodbye.